Okay, another quick video, and this one is on the executive orders as the President of the United States of America and the orders as Commander-in-Chief that the President gives to the military. So if you've been watching my other videos, you know that I've pointed it out to you in Article 2 that the President is one, executive officer of the United States of America, and two, that he's the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Land and Naval Forces. So the United States, therefore, are the Land and Naval Forces, and according to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, the United States are the seat of government and places purchased for forts. So the seat of government and the forts, which are the federal lands, are the United States, and everything outside of that is the United States of America. But what I couldn't quite figure out is what was an order as an executive officer of the United States of America. I couldn't figure out exactly what that was for, and I thought it was for the governors of the states. But that wasn't really making a whole lot of sense in my mind, but now I've got it figured out. So what I did was I went back through the officer's manual, and I thought, well, maybe an executive order as President of the United States of America is mentioned in some way in the officer's manual for the military officers, and it was not. There was no mention of the word executive order or executive or president as executive or even the United States of America in relation to an executive order. So there's nothing that I could, no clues in there that I could pick up. So then what I did was I thought, well, I'll look up some state manuals to see if I could find something in there. And what I found was that the executive orders are for the civilians. Civilian means not in the military. It's for the civilians working on the federal lands with the military, but not in the military, which are called civil servants. And those are mentioned in Title V of the United States codes. So this opened up another can of worms, because the people under the executive who work on military posts are not called citizens of the United States. They're civilians, and they come from off the federal lands to work on the federal lands, and they're called citizens of the United States of America. Okay, so if they are citizens of the United States of America and they are civilians, then they are not citizens of the United States. And if that is true, then what I'd said before about the members of Congress being civilians are not citizens of the United States. They're citizens of the United States of America, and therefore do not meet the qualifications in the Constitution to be either a representative or a senator, because representatives and senators have to meet specific qualifications clearly listed in the Constitution, and those are to be a citizen of the United States, which is 7 years for a representative and 9 years for a senator. Let's see. So here in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2, no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States. So most people believe that they are, or we all are, citizens of the United States. We're not citizens of the United States because the word citizen actually means member. And to become a member, you have to take an oath and you have to join the military and you have to live on the federal lands, and you're under contract for a number of years. And if you're an officer, you receive a commission from the president as a commander-in-chief. So if citizens of the United States of America are under executive orders and they are civilians, then they do not meet the qualifications of citizen of the United States. Only those people in a military capacity who have served in the military in the States for 7 or 9 years respectively, because it also says, when elected, shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state. So if that person is not an inhabitant of the state, then they are not a citizen of the United States of America, because citizens of the United States of America are civilians and off federal lands, whereas citizens of the United States are likely those officers in the military with a commission to be a representative, has lived on the federal lands for 7 years in service to his country, and for a senator, which means senior, for 9 years in service to his country as a commissioned officer on federal lands. And 9 years for senators makes them closer to the president. They're the president's advisors because they have more experience at military command. So an executive order is not the same as a military order. An executive order is given to the civilians working on the federal lands, because a military person cannot order a civilian at any time ever, because civilians are private people in the United States of America, as opposed to public officers who are citizens of the United States. The president cannot give orders as the commander-in-chief, as a military person, to civilians, because civilians are private people unless they're on post working as a public servant. And he can issue orders to the public servants, but only as a civilian. So the executive has the president as the executive must have a civil capacity and also a military capacity. So a military capacity allows him to command military members. And the militia, when the militia are called into service, because the militia is made up of private people or civilians who act in a military capacity. So in the Ukraine right now, we see civilians acting as militia. And when they act as militia, they're acting as a military force, and combatants, and as combatants, can be attacked by an enemy force. Civilians are not supposed to ever be attacked by a military force. So the commander-in-chief doesn't command civilians, he can only command the militia. But the commander-in-chief, when he's in his civil capacity as the executive, can issue orders to the civilians who are acting as civil servants. And again, the civil servants are not members of Congress. The members of Congress are supposed to be citizens of the United States, which places them in a military capacity under orders of the president as commander-in-chief. And as members of the military, makes more sense for members of the military to regulate, so the upper officers can regulate the lower officers on the federal lands inside the states. Regulate them and enforce the laws upon them, and to make rules for them And the president, as commander-in-chief, should have 14 years service to his country also. And he can then, with that experience, understand how and when to regulate and when to order military for military purposes. But since he is also over the militia, it is probably important, or was important to the founders, that he also have a civil capacity. I'm not sure if he's allowed to be a inhabitant of the state. I don't think I've ever actually looked for that. So not being an inhabitant of the state when the representatives and the senators are elected into Congress at the seat of government places them in a certain situation, because not being inhabitants of the United States of America means that they are at that time when elected in their capacity as a commissioned officer. Those commissioned officers, as I've read in the officer's manual, have no authority off federal lands. They have no arresting authority. They have no power. They cannot be part of a posse comitatus. They can do nothing except travel in between military posts and between the military posts in different states. And that brings to light a better explanation or better understanding of Article 3, the judicial powers, when it talks about citizens of a state and citizens of another state, etc. and so forth, because the military areas are considered states and the military itself is considered a state. And state has a much more broader definition than what most people realize, because as I've showed you before in another dictionary, a barge, a big hunk of metal floating in the water, is also considered a type of state. So we have to understand that the way the Constitution uses the word state is a little vague. I might even add a lot vague, very vague. And it sort of has allowed for a lot of bad things to happen. But the more we understand what's going on here, the more we can understand that the government, or as Ron Paul says, the emperor really has no clothes. They really don't. None of them do. And it just so happens that Title II Congress was never passed into law. So Title II Congress, the way it operates now, has never been passed into law. And I think that that has a lot of problems that come along with this understanding, because everything that Congress has done has basically been outside the Constitution, and so it's all void. Then the next question is how do we get compensation for what they've done? Or maybe they'll say it's our fault because we didn't understand the Constitution anyway, and that they were just doing what we wanted them to do. I don't know what they might say, but I know that public opinion always has, and still does, regulate the government and what it thinks it can and cannot do. So with that, am I saying that a strictly military government would be better? No, because they're still humans just like the civilians. Being in the military doesn't make them a better person. It may make them worse persons, but, you know, who knows? We have to start choosing, or having our states choose more ethical and moral people who are willing to do things in a better way than what those people up in Congress are doing now, or what the president is doing now. Okay, so with that, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.